From Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as someone voted against the TARP, I just want to comment on your kind remarks in saying that through the wisdom of Congress, we passed the TARP bill. Number one, as you may remember, TARP was presented to us as a way to purchase toxic mortgages. It was never used for that. So what we voted for was never put into action. Number two, several weeks after we did the TARP bill, we also passed a TARP corrections bill. It was a 400-page bill that we passed to correct all the mistakes that we made in TARP. So I'm not so sure that the wisdom of Congress is necessarily accurately ascribed in that statement. I do want to say I agree with Chairman Kanjorski about the context in which you took all this action. You know, the sky was falling. It was a very difficult time. But I do want to say the reason we're going over this chronology is because we have granted the Fed enormous independence, and there is sometimes a tension between the primacy of the taxpayer's interest and the power of the Fed and the independence of the Fed. And that's why we're going over this. There's been a lot of back and forth today, but basically what the facts are is that Merrill got into trouble very early in 2007 when E. Stanley O'Neill was there. It was a very difficult situation. There was a merger proposal that you supported quite strongly between Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. There was an agreement to enter into that merger, and then at some subsequent time were major losses. There were early losses, $8.4 billion that occurred in 2007. It looked like an additional $12 billion that was discovered by Mr. Lewis on December 14, 2008, and then he announced his desire or his intention to invoke the MAC. And then we have a difference of opinion, and that is, on one side, some folks are saying that you or Mr. Paulson threatened Mr. Lewis. Other people say it was simply iron-fisted encouragement to have him stay in the deal. In any event, he did that. He stayed in the deal. And there's an interesting email from you, and I just want to go over this because I'm interested in the taxpayer's position. It says here, this is from you, Mr. Chairman, to Scott Alvarez. And it says, I had a good conversation with Lewis just now. He confirms his willingness to drop the MAC, the opposition to the deal going forward, and to work with the government to develop whatever support package might be needed for earnings announcements dates around January 20th. We discussed his common equity issue. We agreed that having a significant amount of TARP capital in the form of common equity was not an ideal solution given the ownership implications, but we agreed both to think about possible solutions, parenthesis, a government backstop of a capital raise, or government common with limited control rights. Now, it sounds to me like Ken Lewis is concerned about his job, and for the American taxpayer to get voting rights in return for their TARP money, Mr. Lewis would be gone, I believe. Is that the concern that you believe Mr. Lewis expressed regarding the TARP being presented with rights, voting rights for the American taxpayer in that deal?
I don't know exactly what his concern was. It may have also been involved in just concern about government intervention in his management and in the operations of the company.
Well, this discussion, it is what it is. It indicates that Mr. Lewis is concerned about the taxpayer having some input here, some control. And it sounds like it says, but we agree to think about possible solutions to that, a backstop of capital raise or government taxpayer involvement here with limited control rights. And I'm just wondering whether in this deal to provide this support, whether the taxpayer is getting the full leverage that they should have gotten given the amount of assistance we put into this company, into this deal.
Well, the company is subject both to the restrictions of the TARP and the Treasury's provisions on executive compensation and the like, And they're also subject to, as has been discussed, they're subject to the supervisory oversight of the Federal Reserve and the OCC, and we have taken actions, for example, to ask them to add independent directors to their board and make other appropriate changes to their company.
Could we have not gotten greater protections for the American taxpayer in this deal than what we did, in terms of considering that we're saving this company with the American taxpayer's assistance, and we don't gain the control that I think is commensurate with that support?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back and look at that email again. At that time, the TARP money was all provided in the form of preferred stock, which is, on the one hand, is not voting, but on the other hand, is senior to common equity and therefore is safer.
They get paid first. I understand that, but it's the lack of. It seems like Mr. Lewis was most concerned with lack of input or lack of control on the part of the taxpayer, and I think that would have helped us, you know, in this deal if we had had greater control on behalf of the American taxpayer. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. Again, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for appearing and helping us with our work. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Now you